Sunil, let me turn to you now. Samiran has talked about the fact that the productivity of capital has gone down significantly. And Garry had said about the ease of doing business and strategic factors. So why don't I actually turn to you in terms of what is your big picture view of what are the problems that are afflicting, and if you can sort of possibly tie in with the aspects that have been highlighted by other two speakers.
There are three factors which are clearly very visible at this point of time, which will shape the future to come for the next few years. The factor number one, in the current global scenario, where you're looking at a series of quantitative easing, one country stops, the other country starts. Okay, we don't know where finally it is going to stop. In that scenario, India clearly looks like one of the most important and almost accepted worldwide turnaround story. The second and very important point, I have just come back from the 2 days of World Economic Forum in Delhi. I must share with you is that India clearly is at the top of the agenda of the international community. Let me give you some anecdotal examples. In the month of October, we had 16 global CEOs visiting India. It has never happened. It's unprecedented. We read about them in the press, but that's the kind of interest India is right now capturing. Imagine if we are able to convert that energy into the real effect. The amount of investment which India can attract, I guess it will change a lot of stats which we've just heard, right? In just the last week, before the World Economic Forum, in 1 week we had 3 global CEOs coming in. In the World Economic Forum itself, we saw the amount of, the number of conversations, the positive conversations. So most of them were positive. I've been attending this for many years, but this time round it was definitely very, very positive. The third and the final point I would want to make is that there is clearly, first time in 30 years, we have voted for one-party government, and the party which is known as a pro-business party, the Prime Minister who fought on the basis of developmental agenda, and this is what he is reiterating. And we have seen some initial signs of structural changes. We have seen FDI in defense, FDI in railway. It has not happened. 100% FDI in railway. Let's see if we really give it a proper shape and we start restructuring railway. Post-independence, we haven't invested anything in railway. And then there are other issues. Obviously, it is just the first 5 months. We still need to give more time to the government. But clearly, I think the government is on the path of making structural changes across the different sectors. And if those happens, then I'm not sure about the 10% or even 9.4 of Standard Chartered, but certainly the future definitely looks much better than what we have seen.
So let me turn to you now, Manish. And you are head of a firm that actually has growth in its in its entire DNA and the name. So how do we get growth then?
So let me stay on the right side of the panel and in a way take what Sunil said and amplify it further. So I think it's, if I look back 25 years ago when I was an MBA student like you, I produced a thesis like Samiran said and what India needs to do. And every 5 years you get despondent and you say, but the issues which were 25 years ago still seem to be there. And yet here we are 25 years later. I remember the largest company in India in 1990 made a profit of 150 crores, which was Reliance. It just crossed Tata Steel that year. And the same entity now makes 25,000 crores a year. So a lot has happened. If I had told you we'll go through 6 changes of government, we'll have Deve Gowda and Inder Kumar Gujral and we'll be pariahs of the world with the Pokhran explosion, you would have been despondent. You wouldn't want to build your career in India. And it's been fabulous 25 years. So I don't think you should feel despondent, and I also echo what Garry said, don't get too happy too soon. But reality is, other than say the Narasimha Rao period of the early 90s and the Vajpayee period of the early 2000s, we haven't really had proper governments. Right. There's also a reality that since independence, we've run through a Nehruvian socialist sort of prism of the world. And I think the world recognizes that this could be India's Deng Xiaoping moment, where while Vajpayee ji was, pragmatist, visionary, but poet, literary person. It didn't really change the political discourse. I think we have a real chance to break out now where you've got a right of center, political leadership at the center, and where you're turning away from where the Sarkar is my baap and I will decide everything and I'm handing you these privileges as a citizen. If you think of the superstructure of India being changed fundamentally, there is one small piece of reform which has happened where you say a citizen can certify himself who he or she is and what document he or she has taken. It's fundamentally a change in mindset, saying that the citizen at the center of the universe and the government is a support provider. These changes won't happen overnight, and I don't think till a 2016 Rajya Sabha kind of majority is achieved, you will find very radical changes happening. But to mirror the point of, you need to create capacity, and that capacity will come from, say, natural resources, railways, military. I think we will see over the next 3 months big moves on mass housing and tourism. So that would be our capacity creation end. And we've systematically underinvested in infrastructure, and we'll talk about that as we go along, of where do we get the resources. Leg 2 would be, as he rightly said, the productivity enhancement areas, which the heavy hitting has to come from administrative reform, labor reform and the like. And the part 3, which is really skill building, value addition, capacity creation, because 10% GDP growth you can get if you keep shuffling gems and jewelry back and forth 20 times. You can accelerate the GDP. You want value added GDP, and it won't happen until we've fixed infrastructure and built skills. I think you're seeing for the first time that the right issues are being picked up and put in the right buckets, and no one's trying to play a T20 game where they want to get big headlines in the first few months. But starting with deep substantive change, I think the moves are underfoot. The discourse of the country has changed, I think, fundamentally. And I'm hopeful as we approach 2016, we will start seeing a lift-off. It's not like Deng Xiaoping came in 1980 and dramatically turned China. It even took them 15 years. So let's hope, and with all of us here, we keep voting the way we have for development rather than on identity and caste and stuff like that. And I think we will claim our future.
You spoke about the skill deficit, the fact that the economy needs jobs and really good jobs. The reality is that 85% of the workforce is in the unorganized sector. And that is not despite the labor laws, but oftentimes it's actually because of the labor laws. The fact that the hurdles are so high. So trying to sort of just, bring these two issues together, that on the one hand, you want to reduce the demand-supply, mismatch that is there in skill, and on the other hand, actually structurally removing some of the bottlenecks that will help remove this. So let me turn back to you, Sunil, to Manish. What do you think are the important aspects of labor reforms? Are some of the low-hanging fruits that can be plugged, because labor reforms actually are something that seems the political animal, unions, etc. And so you need political consensus. But there may be some low-hanging fruits which may be actually easier to pluck without necessarily sort of angering any of the stakeholders, so to say.
Again, I'll just say illustratively, you see how they've approached the problem from both ends. So there is approach, which is the Factories Act, where you're completely paralyzed in wanting to hire labor because you have this Inspector Raj going, and that's starting to get dismantled. And like a game of chess, you don't start by being a lightning rod and attracting everything at the center. So for example, that started from Rajasthan. From an eastern state, they even have government officials who have to go into biometric check-in to show that they are actually at work. So there is little small changes which, like a game of billiards, you hit one ball and see, what all it goes and hits. So that end of the change has started. And at the other end, the skilling is not going to happen from the IITs and the IIMs. You need them at the apprentice level, which is, to the German example, where you have these apprentices getting trained on skilled jobs. And you don't get them agitated enough, because even if they come out in the next 2 years and you start skilling them, you haven't yet created the factories and the infrastructure there. And the small, fitters and carpenters and welders for a lot of this mass housing construction, I would think the first big moves will have to come from there. I don't think we can aspire to becoming a global manufacturing superpower in the next 5 years even. And to encourage manufacturing, it will be like the US where you get the military defense establishment to be the whole kickstarting of this manufacturing.
That's a good point.
So when you see all of these coming together, you see there is a strategic mind now playing. And it's not sporadic reform or the exciting reform we would like in the capital markets, but these are substantive, deep reforms.
Real side reforms. Very good, actually. So let me very briefly summarize in terms of what I'm gathering from the eminent panel that I have. So that one, the economic discourse seems to be poised for a big change from the socialist economics to respecting the market and sort of, as Adam Smith said, the reason you have bread on the table is because of the greed of the baker. So trying to respect the market, and there seems to be reforms that are actually happening, which some of may not excite the capital markets necessarily immediately, but there are sort of a lot of reforms that are happening on the back end, which actually might sort of really kickstart economic growth.